Hello, my name is Kelvin and I am the Pan Man Steel Pan Handler. Today what I'd like to do is just go over the theory of the cycle of fifths, also cycle of fourths, with major scales. So let's get started. The reason, or any major scale that you have, you've got a basic pattern. The reason I use the major scale first is because that's the one we're most familiar with and which holds most of the things we know there. So using the C major scale, you've got 7 notes, no flats, no sharps. C, whole step. Now with using your steel drum, it is laid out so that a whole step, you actually skip the note. And whenever you're progressing through the scale, you're always going to go counterclockwise. So starting with C, going counterclockwise and skipping the next note, skip up for a whole step, and you end up on D. Skip the note in the third note or degree. In music theory, you'll call this degrees. This is the third degree from C. So with C being 1, the first degree, you have your second degree of D, your third note or degree of E. Now with major scales, after the third note, it's a half step, not a whole step. So if you were to take a whole step, skipping a note, that would be F sharp. And notice naturally, you just go to the F because there's no sharps or flats. So E, F, skip, counterclockwise, G is your 5th degree or note, skip, A is your 6th degree or note, and B is your 7th degree or note there. So, using the major scale anywhere that you go, you skip until 3, do a half step, and the 4th note is on the drum is always going to be the note clockwise to the note you start on. The 5th note is always going to be the note counterclockwise to the note you start on. So let's just use this in theory. B, skip to C sharp, skip to D sharp. Now go to the 4th note, which is always clockwise to the one you began on, which is E. Skip F sharp, skip G sharp, skip A sharp, and then your 7th to your 1st is always going to be a half step as well, and that's always going to be to the 7th to the 1st. So you're always going to go 3 to 4, of course, and the 4th note is always going to be clockwise to the note you started on in a major scale, and the 7th note is your last note, so you're just going to go right back to your 1st degree or note. So the reason they call it the cycle of fifths or cycle of fourths, depending on if you go clockwise or counterclockwise. You go counterclockwise through your scale, which is why normally you go through the normal scale, cycle of fifths. Each time, if you don't skip and the note directly next to it is going to be the 5th of the note before it. So this is the 5th of B. This is the 5th of F sharp. This is the 5th of F. This is the 5th of C. And anywhere you go on the drum, you start with a note, which of course will start with the easiest C. That's your first note or degree. So 1, 2, 3, half, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then you just go to your octave, which would be the next higher in the same pattern. So hopefully that explained thoroughly the cycle of fifths. So what I'd like to do now is go ahead and just clear everything out. Well, actually what I'll do is, since we're dealing with a C scale, we'll only use the notes that are actually in the scale. And we'll use a little darker shade for, let's just use a whole different color. Now that makes it very obvious that this is the note we started on. All of the other notes are actually notes in that major scale. So now actually go through with the drum the notes of the major scale. Okay, so we start with C, skip G, go to D, skip A, go to E. Now, that's the third, so we have to go to the fourth, which is always directly counterclockwise, directly clockwise to the original note. 4, skip C, 5. Notice this is all fifth and the fourth. Skip D, 6, skip E, 7th. And this is where we would start over or go to the next octave, which is a half step from 7 to 1. Or if your next note in the scale, you're going to skip, and that puts you at C. So any way you look at it, you can say, okay, I know these are not in the scale. I got to skip my next note in the scale to get to the whole step, which is actually a half step from B to C, since you had to skip those notes. All right, so the reason it's important to know 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then octave is because next we're going to learn about chords, and the chords are always going to be a certain number within the scale or a certain degree, which is why we call it degrees. Major chord, for instance, is going to be your first degree, your third degree, and your fifth degree. That's always going to be a major. And since those always fall on the same pattern on the drum, then it's always going to be what? Fifth degree is always next counterclockwise to the one you're starting on, and the third degree. You're going to always skip 2 to get to that, from the fifth to get to that third. So you start, go to the next one, counterclockwise is your fifth, skip 2, and you'll be at the third. No matter where you go on the drum, if you were to start at B, you know that the major of it is you go next F sharp, skip the next 2, and that's D. That pattern holds true everywhere, and that is what we will discuss in future videos. My name is Kelvin. I am the Pan Man, Steel Pan Handler, and I enjoy teaching people things about not only music theory, very therapeutic when you can play your own music and make it sound exactly the way you want to. And that is the purpose of these videos, is to give you an avenue to know how to play the music exactly the way you want it and make it so that it gives the best positive impact to you and then to those around you. Thank you.